Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Loaded Sport, where today we're going to be previewing all the football and NFL action, also looking towards a couple of games that are taking place this weekend as we build up towards the 2022 World Cup. Make sure you are keeping an eye on things on www.loadedsport.co.uk, where we'll also tomorrow be releasing an entire World Cup preview with plenty of talking points to look to what's kicking off this weekend. Joining me to speak about the football and the NFL is Kemp and Skin. Good afternoon.
Man with the mic, you little pot of Cajun gravy, you. I want to pour you over my chicken.
We all right? Are you okay?
He told me he was going to do that and it was still right funny.
How you doing, Adam? You all right?
I'm even better now. That's a great way
Good.
to say
Good,
hello.
man. Good, man. Perk you up a bit. Perk you up on this cold Wednesday evening.
He's a bit under weather into the old Aggie, but you've got football later, so I'm sure he'll be ready. But Adam, I've got a song for you that I'm just going to sing for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Just you're putting a lot of time in behind the scenes. You know, work ethic is a big thing, and you'll know the guy called Pete from TikTok. He has a lot of worship for Darwin Núñez.
Yes.
So in tribute to that and in tribute to you, mate, I've wrote a song to the tune of that, and it goes like this. Adam Marsden, he came from radio to Loaded Sport. His arse is fucking massive. It's there to counterbalance his big length. Adam Marsden. Do you like that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll be saving that as a ringtone, I think, from now.
Amazing. That's got to be the new jingle. Is that not the new jingle?
It's got to be the new jingle.
I'll put it in as a new jingle as well. Then there we
jingle.
go.
There you go.
We'll kick things off.
Christmas.
We'll kick things off by looking at the football this weekend. No Premier League, no Championship until for at least a month as we look towards the World Cup. So we are looking at League One, League Two, and the National League. We'll start by Skin coming over to you for what your game of the week this week is going to be.
Well, I'm going to avoid all of those games, mate. And originally, I was going to speak about Town at home to Solihull Moors. Pretty big game in the National League, I think. But I always class weekend games as Friday to Monday. Friday, you have your sort of first games, and it rounds off with Monday Night Football. It's got to be England versus Iran in the World Cup, hasn't it? Monday, 1 o'clock kickoff. What can you say? It's the opening game of the World Cup. Last World Cup was a bit of a slow start against Tunisia. Harry Kane scoring that late winner. And then it turned into that semi-final run that we all remember really, really well. So I'm going to go my game of the weekend being England versus Iran. It ain't going to be a pushover. England are in, they're not in the greatest form at the moment, are they? And Iran are no pushovers either. I was looking at their recent results earlier, and their last game, which, to be fair, was just under 2 months ago, but they did beat a full-strength Uruguay side who a lot of people are expecting to do relatively well at the World Cup. So I don't think it'll be the easiest game. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be tense. And like in 2018, it might take a late goal from someone like Harry Kane just to get us over the line and get that sort of, get the squad going into the next games against USA and Wales. So yeah, I'm going to go England versus Iran as my game of the weekend. What about you, Kemp?
You know what? I'm going to stick with that sort of theme. I am going to say the later kickoff on that day. A fellow team in Group B. That's going to be USA versus Wales. I think it's going to be a really tasty fixture. I feel like Wales are really up for it. I believe it's the first World Cup in God knows how long, maybe ever, I think. Is it, Adam? I don't know. But it's a massive...
Was that Wales?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Wales.
64 years.
64 years. So it's a long old time to not have qualified for a World Cup. So they will really be up for it. And the USA, you look at their squad, you look at the players they've got, and they're not to be sniffed at. You know, you've got the likes of Pulisic, Reina.
I'd love to sniff you.
Well, who wouldn't? But you've got some great players in that USA squad, and I think it's going to be a really interesting game. And I think it's going to give us a good indication of who's going to be a serious contender in Group B and who's going to be, you know, potentially a bit of a pushover alongside Iran, hopefully. But again, like you just said, with England, especially with Mr. Southgate at the helm, I feel like there's no pushovers. Adam, what's your game of the week upcoming?
My game of the week, I've gone for a completely different theme. I'm not even touching on the World Cup. I'm going to save that for the World Cup preview show. I've gone for Northampton against Bradford. in League 2, third against fourth in League 2. With a win, Bradford can go into automatic promotion. I know there's still a long way to go of the season, but these sort of games are the ones you look back on and see as missed opportunities to either get away from the group below you or obviously fight yourself into automatic promotion. I saw us play Northampton a couple of weeks ago in the FA Cup. Very good performance from us, an okay performance from them, but they're third in League 2 for a reason, and I daren't say that their form's just going to go down because they've lost to Chesterfield in the FA Cup. Bradford, another good side. I think you're in for a very good game between the two sides there. And like I say, with a win for Northampton, they've got a chance to move up to second, move further away from falling out of automatic promotion. In League 2, 3 go up automatically. Then you've got your 4 in your playoffs. So for Bradford, it's a case of jumping above Northampton. And these, like I say, are the sort of games you look back on. We've all done it as football supporters and said if we'd got 3 points against them or if we'd rescued a point against them, it'd be a completely different situation. So for me, it's going to be Northampton against Bradford as the one to look forward to. I've just got a quick question for you, Skin, on the back of you saying that Iran aren't going to be pushovers. It's going to be quite a difficult game for England. There's got to be, if it is going to be a case of a late goal from Harry Kane, a lot of the nations, we're going to be happy about the fact we got 3 points, but a lot of the nations just going to be disappointed at the fact that it was just by a late goal from Harry Kane and going to be screaming out for a lot more throughout the remainder of the tournament. Because with all due respect to them, I think in terms of ranking, they might just be the lowest in Group B, taking into account Wales and the United States as well. So it's one of them games that if we struggle against them, there's going to be a lot of disappointment heading into and lowered expectations into games like USA and Wales, don't you think?
If this had been at the Euros or the last World Cup, maybe so, but I think we're kind of used to that now. I mentioned the very late win against Tunisia. Where did that World Cup end? It was, probably the best, I say probably other than the Euros, but I think even then in terms of the hype and how the country were behind him and everything else like that, and, the pandemic in the Euros killed it a little bit. So as a whole, I think how happy that people were with the team after the World Cup was probably the best since we won the World Cup in 1996. So no, I don't think so. I think it's kind of we give them the benefit of the doubt because we started off the World Cup 2018 the way we did against Tunisia. We struggled in the group stages in the Euros, drawing 0-0 against Scotland in the second game. So even though as a whole those tournaments were really positive, and Kemp, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of things to say when we speak tomorrow about the World Cup as a whole, but yeah, I think if it is a bit of a tough performance and we just get over the line, people will be happy that we got over the line because we've proven that we can move on and improve throughout the tournament, but based on what we did in the Euros and World Cup in Russia 4 years ago. So no, as long as we get 3 points, I don't think people will be too bothered about how we go about doing that.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you for a very in-depth answer there. Like you say, we'll be talking more about England's chances in the World Cup tomorrow. Moving on to players that we kind of expect to see a couple of goals from. Lock of the week, if you will, the treble that we're starting to bring into football. We did it with NFL last week. I made a very poor choice last week, which I'll apologise for a lot throughout the remainder of this podcast, but we'll start with lock of the week from a football perspective. We need a match winner in terms of a side that's going to win a game and a goal scorer, not necessarily from the same game though. We'll start with you, Kemp. Hopefully we're going to be moving away from international games.
We are, mate, don't worry. We're moving into the National League, which I know is your home and will be for a long time. I'm going to go with Southend United away at Gateshead. Gateshead are bottom of the league. Southend United are doing pretty well. I think they're going to win pretty comfortably. I don't usually back away teams, but I think Southend are going to come out of this one and look pretty strong doing so. I think I'm going to stay in the non-league as well for the scorer of the week. As long as Paul Mullins fit, I think Paul Mullins is going to have a day against Aldershot. Aldershot are 18th, Wrexham up near the top. Mullins a bit of a beast at that level. So I'm going to go for Southend and Paul Mullin. Adam?
I've gone for. I haven't actually put down a team at the moment, so I'll let you know my team in just a moment.
This is our host, ladies and gentlemen. This is our host.
I have gone for
a journalist, our host, and doesn't even know the answer to his own question.
I was expecting to go to Skin, to be fair, whilst I was just looking at one there. I'll have an answer, don't worry. I'm going to go with the goal scorer, Paul Smythe, for Leyton Orient away against Stockport. I was looking at this and I was going to go with Paddy Madden, who I'm sure is one of those names that, despite the fact he's never played in the top flight of English football, a lot of people are familiar with the name of. Paul Smythe is the top goal scorer for Leyton Orient in the league at the moment. They're top of League 2. Stockport around the mid-table section at the moment. I think Paul Smythe's one of those players that when you need a goal in one of them difficult games, he's just going to turn up and score a goal for you. Stockport themselves weren't really expected to be in the top half of League 2. They've got a chance to make it into the playoffs. It's very close in League 2 at the moment, between, I think it's just below Bradford in 5th place, moving down the league table. And I think Paul Smythe's going to be the one that scores for Leyton Orient. In terms of a game, I'm going to be moving up into League 1 for this one. And although I've gone for this as a bit of a later comment as well, I'm going to go with Ipswich. I backed these in Last Man Standing a few weeks ago. They're the 12 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. They're away against Exeter. And similar to you, Kemp, I don't tend to go for sides that are away from home. But I think Ipswich at the moment, being second place in League 1, a chance to close that gap on Plymouth, that they're a good side that you'd say are too strong of a side to be in League 1. And I think with Exeter in 9th place, a chance for them to make it into playoffs. It's going to be a close game, but I'm going to edge it towards Ipswich, and they're going to be my team to win. With them playing Exeter, another good side, I think you're going to be looking at some very good odds there as well. Skin, what's yours?
I've just very quickly had to scrape for another answer on my scorer pick, because I was also going to go Mullen again. I went for him last week. They played away, didn't score after that 0-0 draw, but Wrexham at home are a different kettle of fish. So thanks for that, Kemp. But I've turned it around. And my lock of the week in terms of a team, I'm going to go Sheffield Wednesday at home to Shrewsbury, at Hillsborough, in flying form at home at the minute. They've won I know, mate. I know you're a blade, but for the purpose of the game, we've got to go for it. They've won 5 out of the last 6 home games. They're currently sitting in 3rd in League 1. There's a bit of a gap between them and Plymouth, but they're only 1 point behind the team you've just picked there, Adam, in Ipswich. So they've got plenty of time and plenty of games to be playing to push that automatic spot. So Sheffield Wednesday at home to Shrewsbury are my lock of the week in terms of a team to win. In terms of a goal scorer, I'm going to go for Macaulay Langstaff, who is the top scorer in the National League for Notts County. He's been in fantastic form. He scored 18 goals in 19 league games this season. Has been a little bit quiet the last couple of games, but I think home to Yeovil, it's a perfect opportunity to get back in the form that he was seeing towards the start of the season. So yeah, I'm going to go Sheffield Wednesday as my team to win, and Macaulay Langstaff of Notts County for my scorer for this weekend.
I think Langstaff's a great shout, and I've got a question for both of you about this, because a lot of people in and around the National League and support sides in the National League, you tend to get a player that scores plenty of goals for your side, and naturally that attracts a lot of interest from sides further up the league. Now, on the last day of the transfer window in August, Kabongo Shamanga, a Chesterfield striker, was set for a move away from the Technique Stadium, was set to move away from Chesterfield, but for one reason or another that fell through just a couple of minutes before deadline day actually passed, and he wasn't able to make that move. Langstaff himself is now outperforming Shamanga. He's in fantastic form, like you've just said there, Skin. He's scoring goals for fun. He's one of them players that you'd look at and say he's definitely too good for National League level. With Notts County storming in the National League at the moment, would you say you'd possibly expect their performances to change should Langstaff leave in January? I mean, a lot of sides at this sort of level, maybe you could look at League 2 and League 1, you sometimes see players getting that chance to go up to maybe a mid-table, if not top-side championship, or maybe a relegation fighting Premier League side sometimes, and it drops your form completely. Do you think that's something that could also happen with Notts County with you going for Langstaff?
It has to. How do you replace someone that at this point in the season scored 18 goals in 19 league games? It's very tough to at any level, regardless. So the short answer is yes, it would be tough to replace him. Does he stick around and see the season through and try and get them back in the Football League? In an ideal world for the Notts County team and the Notts County fans, that's what you'd want. But money talks, and like Shamanga with Birmingham, the price was right, and obviously they were thinking long term about what they could do for the overall squad and club as a whole with that kind of money. So a League 2, League 1, or even a Championship team comes in for a play like that. Like I said, everyone's got a price, and it's what they can do long term with that. So yeah, it'll be hard to replace someone with that kind of record so far this season, regardless of how much they get for him.
And Kemp, I think I'm going to have to ask you from like the opposite side here, because as a Sheffield United fan, you're normally on the receiving end of this, aren't you? You buy players that may be performing well in lower divisions and like nurture them into the squad. So what's your thoughts on it looking like outside in, if that makes sense?
It's very much player by player. It depends. We've signed players before, like Ben Hennigan. I don't know if you've heard of him. I think he plays Sheffield Wednesday now. We signed him. I think he played for Chester and a few other clubs previously to that in the National League. And we brought him in as a really promising centre-back. I personally thought, having played as Chester on Football Manager quite a few times, that he was going to be a real promising, future star. Didn't quite work out for him. And I think it's difficult because the National League, it's such a different level, but it's so difficult to get out of that level. So you do have a lot of quality players sometimes stuck in the non-league. But when they get out of that situation and sort of find themselves up in the football pyramid a little bit, sometimes it can be a little bit much at times. So it's very much a player-by-player basis, in my opinion. I've seen some players come through at Sheffield United who've probably had youth experience, whether it be on loan or coming through the academies at one of these National League sides. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. So it's a gamble. I think it's definitely a gamble, no matter which side you are signing, whichever player. I don't think it means anything. I think it's a gamble. So for me, I think it's interesting. And I think, depending on who you sign, what the players like, their age, etc., I think it can go both ways, to be honest.
That's fair enough. As somebody that's been on the receiving side of it and seen plenty of players move on, I'm going to say that yes, obviously it's going to have an impact on the side, but it's really where you go from there, isn't it? We've had players in the past, when I first started watching, and we had a fantastic League Cup run. Caleb Folan moved off to Wigan. We've had Ian Evatt eventually playing in the Premier League. Liam Cooper currently captain for Leeds and for Scotland as well. Players that moved on, and it's all about how you kind of replace those players, and if you use the funds to help replace those players. And it's very difficult to then attract players from higher divisions back in, if that makes sense. I know it helps with the fact that they've moved and maybe used it as a stepping stone to move on, but I've seen players in the past that have moved on from us and we've not replaced them, and maybe that's one of the reasons why we're sat in the National League at the moment and not still in the Football League. But we'll move on to the fact that with no Premier League and no Championship, it does provide additional opportunities for League 1, League 2, and in some instances as well the National League now, extra time for TV. So with COVID and lockdown becoming a bit more of a thing of the past, a lot of people were talking about how some of the bigger sides in England really needed to help financially push down the ladder towards these League 1, League 2 and eventually the National League sides. This opportunity with the World Cup being on as well has opened the door a little bit for more League 1 and League 2 sides. How big do you think that's going to be for some of these sides to get that sort of extra funding by having these TV opportunities? Kemp, we'll start with you.
It's very important. You look at it and you look at, let's say, for example, I'm going to go a bit of a different way straight away with this answer, but I think Manchester City's operating profits 42 million or something like that. Revenues of 613 million. It's ridiculous the amount of money that the top six clubs are generating, and that's fantastic football finances. Don't get me wrong, but then when you've got your Macclesfields and your Buries, going out of business, heartbeats of the communities. And you've got these clubs going out of business, these historic clubs, and then these other clubs, turn over a 613 million or whatever it is. It's ridiculous. And there's such a disparity between the very top and the very bottom. So I think it's great. Any additional funding or opportunities that these clubs get for additional funding is absolutely welcome. But this is something that needs to be looked at after the World Cup. It's all well and good, during the World Cup, making sure that these clubs getting extra funding or additional funding. But after the World Cup, this is a problem that needs to be addressed throughout football. Whether Tracy Crouch's independent review on football is going to bring anything like that in, I don't know. It's difficult at the minute because the government and the country is facing such a cost of living crisis that how much of a priority is football. But we all know, I would say, that aren't fans of the top six and just want to see that, those clubs rule forever, Super League style. All the, traditional fans of football, especially fans of football in the clubs that aren't in the top six, they all want the pyramid to be funded correctly and these historic clubs to go on and really thrive. I think Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney were talking about a streaming service for the non-league as well. And, how would that work? We need to look at every single avenue to get these funds into these clubs because, some of them are struggling to survive and that's not that's not the way it should be when you've got clubs at the top of the pyramid earning so much money, Adam.
It's money that's not necessarily needed as well, isn't it? Obviously, they're going to be making that sort of money regardless for one reason or another, but it's just money that's becoming then surplus, isn't it? And they don't really need it, so there's nothing stopping them from being able to maybe shed a little bit more of that funding out, being the bigger clubs with that extra finance. But no, I agree with you from the television perspective that after the World Cup, it's something that needs to be addressed on a more regular basis, that we can look at some of these sides. I remember before that whenever there are international breaks, you look more towards the fact that there is the occasional championship game on, but you're never looking at League One or League Two until the playoffs. The FA Cup, yeah, you get a few of them games, but then towards some stages, I mean, last season when we were facing Chelsea, we weren't even televised. There's been sides this year that a lot of people have been questioning, why are they not televised? Buxton, a side that was in the Northern Premier League last year, made the trip to Morecambe, who at the time I believe were in the playoffs of League Two. They're not being televised, and that's a missed opportunity there as well. So sometimes it comes down to looking for the opportunity to help the smaller clubs, as opposed to it being just all about the bigger clubs, so to speak. What's your thoughts there, Skin?
Completely agree with what you've just said, mate. It's all well and good giving them the opportunity when other teams aren't playing, but then we're crying out for support at the lower levels and keeping clubs in a stable position right down to grassroots football. So why does it only have to be when the Premier League's not on a weekend, or the Premier League and the Championship's not on a weekend? There's more than enough games to provide, and more than enough channels now especially, to provide these clubs with the opportunity for 3, 4, maybe even 5 times a season to be getting an opportunity at that chance to be on TV, whatever channel that may be, and getting a bit of extra money pumped in and making sure that we're supporting all levels of football. Kemp, you mentioned there the proposal from the Wrexham board of the streaming service to bring in extra money. We're now in 2022, not far off 2023, and we're still in a position where we're following the same rules that have been in place for way before we were born, and way before some of our parents were born as well. We need to really start looking at how English football is set out in terms of the broadcasting rights, and make sure that all this talk about protecting clubs and building clubs and giving everyone a fair shot, we actually start taking action on that. And that starts with the money that they're getting putting in. And the best revenue of money for football clubs, especially at a lower level, is those ticket sales. But even more importantly, like you said, Adam, those FA Cup ties where they get put on telly, those 2, maybe 3 times a season where Chesterfield will get a late kickoff and end up on BT Sport, they are massive for the lower league clubs. So we really need to start looking at ways to give them that opportunity more often.
I think it's difficult though, and I understand the difficulties that they face, but I understand why it's so difficult sometimes to maybe televise these games when the deals that they've got. I think the non-league will, like you say, have got to deal with BT Sport. There's only so many BT Sport channels. There's only so many games that can be broadcast. But the problem is when you look at the streaming service, and I think that is the way forward, but how many fans that don't go to the Chesterfield game on a weekly basis, for example, because it's Adam's team, it's our local team, are going to subscribe to a streaming service to watch those games? I think there's a lot more nuance to this conversation, and I'm no expert in it, and Adam is probably the best person to talk to with his experience in the media. But it has to be looked at. We have to start that conversation and try and fix it, because at the minute it seems as though it's just, run your club correctly and whatever. But when you've got a club that comes into an owner that comes into a club like Bury's owner, who'd never even been to Bury in his entire life, coming into the club and buying it for a quick buck, not only is there a problem with the fit and proper persons test, but you've got problems everywhere with that. That should not be allowed to happen. So yes, I understand and I agree that clubs need to run themselves, properly and efficiently, and make sure they're not spending beyond the means, because that, you can't do that. But at the same time, there has to be that support network there, and not just a complete top end, top heavy, all the big clubs get all the revenue and all the little clubs get no revenue. I understand that the big clubs bring in the revenue, but without some way of distributing that fairly down the pyramid, you're gonna have no smaller clubs left, and it's gonna end up being an NFL or an NBA, and I don't want that. And even though we are fans of the NFL, and some of the group of friends that we've got are fans of the NBA, we don't want that. We want the English pyramid as it is.
Absolutely, some very strong points on the finances that are going on within English football at the moment. Join us in just a few moments' time and we'll be looking towards Week 11 of the NFL season, and you can find out how you can get involved with the Loaded Sport podcast on social media platforms ahead of the World Cup preview that we're going to be doing tomorrow. Welcome back to episode 4 of the Loaded Sport podcast, where attention now turns to week 11 of the NFL season. But just before we do, I think we need to look at the last week's review that we did and the fact that we previewed the Eagles taking on Washington Commanders, and all three of us thought the Eagles were going to go and win. Quick thoughts, Skin, start with you on the fact that the Eagles are now 8-1, level with the Minnesota Vikings.
I'll very quickly start by saying you've made that out like we all sat here and said Eagles will batter them. I said the Commanders are buggers and it's going to be close and Eagles will win by a touchdown. So I'm going to claim half a point for that because the majority of people would have had an Eagles win, but it was always going to be close. So
claim half a point for predicting the wrong thing.
Yeah, you can't have that.
Absolutely correct.
Congratulations.
And that's why I don't get a full point, because I only get a full point if I had predicted it correctly, should I say. But yeah, look, Mudge said it himself. Unfortunately, can't make it for this recording. That it was coming and it was needed. Sometimes teams that are coasting along nicely just need that little bit of a reality check and a bit of a shock to the system, just to make sure that they don't get complacent later down the season. So I think long term it's not going to be necessarily a bad thing for Eagles to have lost. It's just a case of how they follow up now. If they go on a bit of a losing streak and in a couple of weeks they're 8-3, 8-4. That's when you have to start worrying. But if in the next 3 or 4 weeks, by the end of it, they've only lost this game or maybe one more, I don't think there's a massive amount to be worried about. But credit to the Commanders.
Kemp, I think you started yours by saying you'd love to sit there and tell us that the Commanders are going to beat the Eagles. You can now love to sit there and tell us that the Commanders did beat the Eagles.
I do. I love it. I do love, I'd love it if we beat them, love it. But no, I wanted the result. I didn't think I was going to get the result. I thought it was going to be an Eagles coast to the win, a 2-score victory for the Eagles, I think I predicted. So I've never been happier to be wrong, and I'm not going to claim half a point for predicting the wrong thing like some others would, Adam.
That's very respectable of you. Let's look towards this weekend's game then, and we'll look towards the game of the week before we look at the lock of the weeks for this weekend. The one that I've opted to go for is on Sunday Night Football, and I think it's going to be entertainment from the very beginning when Carrie Underwood gets on stage to the moment that the final whistle goes. The Chiefs at the Chargers is what I'm going for. An AFC West game. The Chiefs 7-2, the Chargers 5-4. They've still got an opportunity to catch up with the Chiefs in the AFC West. To do that, they've of course got to beat them and push themselves ever closer. I don't think the Chargers have quite reached the expectation and the performances that everyone thought of them pre-season. I think Justin Herbert's been very slow to get things going this season. The fact that Keenan Allen must have played about 15 minutes and then the season so far hasn't helped, I'm sure. Mike Williams has therefore been relied on a lot. Everett has as well. But then, of course, most of what they've done has been coming through Austin Eckler, and I think they're going to be reliant on him against the Chiefs again. I think the Chiefs' offense, when everyone saw that Tyreek Hill was going to Miami, there was a lot of questions as to whether Mahomes can do it without the fastest guy in the NFL. He's proving so far that he can still do it. He's got the likes of Juju Smith-Schuster, providing that he can pass concussion protocol. He'll be available again. Mecole Hardman. They've now got Kadarius Toney added in there as well. We can't obviously forget Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think he got his first touchdown for the Chiefs the other day as well. So they've got some very strong people on offense. And then you can't forget Travis Kelce, the number one target for Patrick Mahomes. So I think for both sides, it's just going to be a case of there's a very strong chance you're going to see a touchdown in the majority of drives from both sides on Sunday Night Football. So I'm going for Chiefs against Chargers as my game of the week. Skin, what about you?
My game of the week is Cowboys at Vikings. Vikings coming off of that game of the season contender against Buffalo Bills, we spoke about earlier in the week. And I think this is as big a test for them, which I know a lot of people sort of raise their eyebrow to that, but I'll tell you why. Kirk Cousins, as we know, is a bit of a meme. It's a bit of a joke. His primetime performance, if he plays Sunday 6 o'clock or 1 o'clock Eastern over in America, he has a very good record. The second that he has any sort of primetime game, televised game, that's where he starts to crumble. So I think the Cowboys, in a bit of form, playing really well, fantastic defense, probably the best defense in the league so far this season. Coming to Minnesota in prime time, 9:25 p.m. kickoff over here. I think this is really going to be a true test of if the Minnesota Vikings are legit or not. Because if they can win this game off of the back of beating Buffalo in overtime in Buffalo, I think it's time to start talking about the Minnesota Vikings as NFC contenders. And I think it'd be very hard for anyone really to argue with that kind of evidence to present. So for me, game of the weekend, Cowboys at Vikings. Kemp, what about you, mate?
For me, I'm going to go with the Cardinals against the 49ers. I think that's going to be an absolute barn burner. They are 3 scoring teams, especially San Francisco in the past few weeks with the addition of Christian McCaffrey. I think Kyler Murray's starting to hit a little bit of form now. I think he's starting to find his feet a little bit. Garoppolo's done pretty well since he's come back in. They've got a decent receiving core. I think it's going to be a shootout. I really do, and I think it's going to be great viewing, and that's definitely one I'm going to be looking for for the highlights package on YouTube, Adam. It's going to be a good game, I think.
I wish you'd look for my package.
When do I not?
That's true. Carry on.
I think it's in your game, Kemp. I 100% agree, but I'm hoping that it's going to be a Cardinals win, because if San Fran win, they go to the top of the NFC West. And whilst we're on a bye week, I could really do without that.
I could honestly see either team winning that game. It's a toss-up, in my opinion. I think it's just going to be an unbelievable, really high-scoring game and really free-flowing football. I don't think either defense are going to be very effective in that game, and we're going to see some very noteworthy plays and touchdowns. So I'm like I say, I'm definitely looking forward to that highlights package next week.
Skin, just a question for you on the one that you've mentioned as well, the Vikings against the Cowboys. You said if the Vikings win on the back of a win against Buffalo, it's time to start talking about them being real NFC contenders. We spoke in the review show about how our predictions had changed for the Super Bowl matchup. Does your comment there mean that if the Vikings don't beat the Cowboys, then potentially you're going to take a step back and not see them as NFC contenders whilst they're still 8-2?
Yeah, because I think there is still a lot of doubt of whether Kirk Cousins can get it done in the big games. Yes, they beat the Buffalo Bills at the weekend, but again, that primetime record when the lights are on and the cameras are watching, it's not the best looking record for him. So yeah, for me, look, they're 8-1. They've just beat the Bills. You've got to give them all the credit in the world for doing that. But like I said, it's a different kettle of fish in them primetime games. And if he can't do it now, 8-2, it's still a great record, 10 games in. But a lot of people are going to start doubting whether or not they can get it done when the world's watching. So yeah, this for me is a bigger test for them this week than last week was, because they've come off that win. Now they're in primetime. Can they still get the job done?
Kemp, do you think you could maybe give us your own unbiased opinion on that? I'm not saying that Skins is biased, but I understand obviously your connections with Justin Jefferson might make yours a little bit more biased.
How can you say they're not? Yeah, I am biased with my LSU boy leading the charge, but yeah, how can you say they're not? I mentioned it in the review show that they've taken everybody by surprise. I still don't think they'll get to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. Like I say, I've got Bucks and Chiefs on that one, but they've had an unbelievable start to the season. They've had that loss, so it's not as if they've had the sort of Eagles syndrome where they might have been getting a little bit complacent. I think they're in a really good position. I think the Cowboys, I don't think they know who their best option is, especially at quarterback. Can their running backs, run the ball down the Vikings' throat, and hopefully they can get something there? I hope, again, the Vikings win, but not just because of my LSU boys, but obviously because of the Dallas Cowboys. But at the same time, you can't think they're not legit if they're 9-1. There's just no way. So really looking forward to, again, seeing that game and seeing how it plays out. And fingers crossed, I'm happy again on the review show because the Dallas Cowboys have lost once again.
And like Skin said, if they were to lose and go to 8-2, does it cast any doubt in your mind of whether the Vikings could really get themselves through the playoffs? I know it's any given Sunday.
Well, I don't, to be honest, and that's what I've sort of mentioned there, that I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders anyway. I do think they have got a young roster from what I've seen, and the experience down the stretch, is it there? Have they got I know it's difficult because not every team's got a Brady type figure, so I won't make that comparison, but have they got that leader that can really keep emotions in check when they get down the stretch and get to that sort of, end game? because you really do need to keep your emotions in check when you get to that point. Nobody expected anything from the Vikings at the start of the season, and they could not only be going to the playoffs but getting a really favourable run with a few home games thrown in. So yes, they could do some damage in the playoffs if they keep the feet on the ground. I don't think they'll get too far. I don't think they'll make championship game. I think they'll be gone before that, because I just think that they'll get to the playoffs and it'll be, we've had such a good season, and I think they might get ahead of themselves at that point. But I think they'll have a great record going into the playoffs, most definitely. But I think, unfortunately, when it comes to the playoffs, they will fall a little bit short. If they do lose, they really need to pick themselves up, because if they lose, it's going to be a real kick in the teeth when they had a proper opportunity against a Cowboys team that aren't playing at 100% at the moment. So if they lose, they will really have to pick themselves up. But even if they win, like I say, I can't see them going down the stretch anyway, if I'm honest.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the lock of the week. I promise I actually understand what this means now. Last week, I went for Chuba Hubbard. I think he must have been there for about 3 snaps. He made about 3 runs in the entire of the game. Other than that, it was all with Deontay Foreman. So I'm thinking I understand this a little bit more, and I'm going to go, although we went running backs last week, I've gone for a tight end this week, and I'm going to go with TJ Hockenson. 115 yards in his 2 games at the Vikings, and he seems to be becoming more and more involved in that Vikings offense. I know we've already spoken about them up against the Cowboys, but I think he's got a very good opportunity of getting himself his first touchdown in the Vikings jersey as he starts to get more and more, like I say, involved with the Vikings offense. The team that I've gone for is the Chicago Bears, who have really turned the corner. Justin Fields has just come out as a completely different player over these last couple of weeks. Now adding to the running game that they've got with Montgomery, now Khalil Herbert's on IR as well, it adds a little bit more of help for them. You look at the fact that now they've got Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney getting involved a bit more, and in the last 2 weeks, I believe in each of those weeks, Cole Kmet has got 2 touchdowns in each game. So I think the Bears, against a very disappointing Falcons side as well, especially on defense, I think that's a very strong bet to go for the Bears to beat the Falcons and TJ Hockenson to score for the Vikings against the Cowboys. Kemp?
I think I'm going to go for the Cincinnati Bengals. We mentioned them last week. They've gone a little bit under the radar. They are 5-4. They're having an okay season. They sort of seem to have been hitting their stride a little bit in recent times. I think the offensive line still definitely a question mark, and it's not been answered yet. They still need to add pieces there. I don't think they're going to get to the Super Bowl again. I don't think they're going to go that far, but I think they're going to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers that have looked pretty lackluster so far this season. I think they'll come out of that one pretty comfortably, and that's my team lock of the week. For my touchdown scorer, I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers. I did just mention that it's going to be a bit of a shootout and a barn burner in that game, and I think they're going to be so worried about a CMC running the ball down the throat. They're going to be a couple of receivers open, and Ayuk is their most prolific receiver this season so far. So they're my locks of the week, Dawson.
Thank you very much for not taking my picks off of me, because Adam decided to go to you first. So my lock of the week for the team, I'm going to go for the Baltimore Ravens to beat the Carolina Panthers. Ravens 6-3, but those 3 losses have been very close. They've won their last 3 games. They've beat the Browns, they've beat Buccaneers, they've beat the Saints. So getting back into a bit of form since their close loss and late loss to the New York Giants. Panthers are going to be a top 3 draft pick come April. They're in bad form. I know they won their last game against the Falcons, but they're not exactly performing to a great standard either. So yeah, my lock of the week for team is Baltimore Ravens beat Carolina Panthers. And for my touchdown scorer of the week, I am going to go for Cordarrelle Patterson for the Atlanta Falcons, as I just mentioned there, at the Chicago Bears. I think it'll be a game full of a lot of running. Justin Fields has run for over 300 yards in the last 2 weeks. Falcons are a much stronger team when they've got Patterson in the team. He didn't have many touches in that game against Carolina, but that was a lot of bad weather. He'd just come back from injury, so it doesn't surprise me. I expect him this week to get back to the sort of usual role, the usual amount of carries that we're used to. So yeah, I'm going to go Patterson for my pick to score a touchdown this weekend.
I think both very good shouts. I think Patterson's a very good shout, considering the fact that a couple of weeks ago when he came back off IR, they were supposed to just be easing him into the game, and he still managed to get 2 touchdowns for him. And I think that's really, there or thereabouts, all they're really using on offense at the moment, the Falcons. They've got Drake London, they've got Kyle Pitts, but neither really seem to be used to any effectiveness, are they? It's predominantly on Cordarrelle Patterson, isn't it?
Yeah, they're a different team with and without him. I'm not going to say that they're going to start becoming a playoff-bound team with him or anything, but they definitely put more points on the board when they've got him in the team. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that he'll see the scoreboard this weekend. Not really sure who will win that game, but there should be plenty of points in it.
So we're not talking about MMA on the review show. There are no big MMA events coming up this weekend, but I just wanted to sort of put it on the podcast of my appreciation and probably every MMA fan's appreciation for Anthony Rumble Johnson, who passed away earlier this week at a very young age. I think he had a long illness that hasn't been officially declared yet, so I'm not going to speculate on the reasons and the causation, but I think every single MMA fan and combat sports fan that will listen to the podcast and all around the world will really extend their condolences to the friends and family of Anthony Rumble Johnson, a real powerhouse that tore his way through the UFC light heavyweight division and unfortunately came up short. But what a fighter, what a man, and he'll be sorely missed, Adam. I just wanted to put that one in quickly there before we finish.
No, man, absolutely. Skin, just to let everybody know how they can get in touch on social media platforms before we bring in a brand new feature to Loaded Sport.
Yes, mate. So if you want to follow us or like our page on Facebook, just search for Loaded Sport. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at Loaded Sport, and Instagram is at Loaded_Sport. We're going to be uploading our episodes to Spotify. So again, just search for Loaded Sport, and then within a few hours, it'll be on YouTube. For those of you that don't have Spotify or prefer using it on YouTube, again, just search for Loaded Sport, subscribe, follow, all the usual stuff. So you're in touch of exactly what's happening, when we plan to release, and most importantly, when those releases drop, so you can have a good listen. We're always open to feedback. We're always open to, the good stuff that you're hearing, the bad stuff that you're hearing, things that you think we should add or take away, anything like that. We're brand new. This is our 4th episode of recording. Next week, we're going to have Sam and Mudge with us a bit more often. So we really want to put a lot of effort into this, a lot of focus into this, and do it right. But we can only do that if we've got the listeners. So if there's anything that you want to see or hear, we'll obviously take it into consideration. But we're seeing some really positive numbers so far and some great feedback as well, and we really appreciate that.
And yes, and thank you to everybody that's got in touch already with your predictions for the World Cup. You can still do so in the aforementioned ways. We're looking for the World Cup winner, the runner-up, how far you think England might get, and the top goal scorer expectation as well. We'll be discussing that more tomorrow in the World Cup preview show. The brand new feature that's coming to Loaded Sport will start with a little bit of a preview now and a trial heading in towards the end of the World Cup, and then we'll really get things underway with a leaderboard that's going to be available on loadedsport.co.uk. You can get involved as well, and we'll have a leaderboard for the listeners and the supporters of Loaded Sport as well, and we'll have a little leaderboard that I can happily sit at the very bottom of with something that we're calling Pick 6, which is a bit of a relation to the NFL, but it isn't solely NFL based. We've got 6 different games, whether this is football, NFL, when things really get underway with tennis and Formula 1, and of course when the next UFC and boxing events are as well, we'll be including matches from there. It will more often than not include 2 sides, not again necessarily to be related just to teams. All you've got to do is pick the winner between them. You win, you get a point, and you go up the leaderboard as so. So we'll start with this week's Pick 6. Skin, I'll come to you first for your prediction on Exeter against Ipswich. If you could give a bit of a reason, that'd be great. If not, just a simple winner would be terrific.
I'm not going to give you a winner, mate. I'm going to go for a score draw. Ipswich are a very good side. I backed them pre-season to get promoted in League One, and that's paying off very well at the minute with them second in the table. But their away form, different to their home form. The home form is where they're getting the majority of their points. So I'll go for a 2-2 draw this weekend between Exeter and Ipswich.
Kemp?
I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Ipswich. I think it'll be a closer game than people think, but I think in the sort of last 5-10 minutes, Ipswich will really turn it on, make the quality count, and I think they'll pick up the win.
I think considering the fact that I've gone with Ipswich as the lock of the week for me as the team away against Exeter, I feel like I can only go for them in the Pick 6 option. The first of the NFL games is the Saints against the Rams, kicking off on Sunday at 6 p.m. Kemp, we'll start with you on this one. 2 sides that before the season you'd probably have expected this to be a bit more one-sided, but as the season's unravelled, and especially now that the Rams have had to place Cooper Kupp on IR, it makes things a little bit tougher for them with Matt Stafford potentially coming back for injury from this game.
It does, and that's why I think the Saints will win. I think without those weapons, the Rams' offense is really, really diminished, and I don't think they've got it enough about them on either side of the ball to get the W against the Saints. The Saints aren't amazing by any stretch of the imagination. I think they'll just be a little bit stronger. When you look at the game, Andy Dalton's not a generational quarterback. Everybody knows that. But if they can get Kamara running, if they can get the receiving core, Olave in particular, let's be honest, catching a few balls and making a few plays, I don't think it's going to take that much to get this one done. So I think it'll be close, but I think the Saints will take it.
Yeah, I'll go Saints as well by a late field goal by Will Lutz to win it.
Fair enough, and I've gone for the Rams on that one, despite the fact there's no Cooper Kupp. The fact that Matt Stafford will be back will be a big lift for them, and I think they'll just see off the Saints. Again, neither side's been pulling up any trees, so I think it's going to be a close game, but the Rams will just edge that. Looking at the World Cup now for this one, Qatar against Ecuador. I imagine there's going to be only one winner for it, but potentially home advantage could sway that in a different way, but I'm still going to stand by and go Ecuador. Sunday at 4 o'clock, I believe this one kicks off as well.
That's right, mate, and I'm actually going to go with a draw. Qatar are actually in better form than what you think. It won't be a high-scoring game, a 0-0 or a 1-1 maybe. Ecuador, 4 out of the last 5 games have been 0-0. They've won 2 out of the last 6. 4 of them have been 0-0, and the 2 that they've won was 1-0. So I'm not expecting a lot of goals. I think the atmosphere it's going to be a strange World Cup, which we'll get into in the preview show. But yeah, I'm going to go for a low-scoring draw in the opening World Cup game this year. Kemp, what about you, mate?
0-0. It's going to be 0-0. It's going to be boring. It's going to be strange. And I think the big talking point, and again, we'll go through this in the World Cup show that we've probably plugged about 50 times this week, but World Cup show coming up. It's going to be a boring game, and I think the bigger talking points are going to be the politics rather than the football, Adam.
Yeah, I think that's going to be surrounding a lot of the World Cup games, especially at the beginning. So I've gone for a draw for both of you on that one. The final of the NFL games then, we've got the Cowboys at the Vikings. If we haven't already spoken quite a bit about this one, Skin?
I don't think I gave a prediction. It was my game of the week, weren't it? So I explained why I thought it was the game of the week, but I didn't actually give a prediction on how I thought it would go. I'm going to go with the Cowboys with this one. I don't think there'll be a lot of points. I'll be surprised if there's over 30, 32 points. I do think it'll be low scoring. I'll go 17-14 to Cowboys.
Okay, Kemp?
Minnesota Vikings, it might be more hope than reality, but I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to take this one. I think it'll be close. I think it might just be a field goal at the end of the game, but I think they'll make it count, and I think they'll win the game.
And I've gone with the Vikings as well. I think the comeback they put on the Bills towards the back end of the game last weekend just shows that the Vikings have got that if they want to reach that next gear. And some of those catches that Jefferson was pulling off as well just made it very difficult for the Bills to handle. And I think up against the Cowboys, it's going to be a similar story. So I'm going to go with the Vikings on that. Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff in League 2, 3rd against 4th. I put it down as my game of the weekend. Didn't put a prediction at the time. I'm going to go with Bradford now. It is Northampton against Bradford. Kemp?
Bradford, I'm going to back the home team. In a game like this, I would always back the home team. I think both teams are in pretty decent form. I don't think there's that much between them, but I have also got Bradford on my promotion accumulator. So I'm going to go Bradford on this one, Adam.
Skin?
I'm going to go 2-1 to Northampton. Bradford, not the best form at home at the minute. And to be fair, Northampton have dropped a couple of points recently and lost in the cup, as we discussed earlier. But I think, 2-1 Northampton is my prediction for that one.
And the final one is Arsenal's women's team against Manchester United's women's team in the FA Super League. Arsenal currently sat at the top of the Super League, 6 wins from 6. Manchester United in 3rd place with 5 wins from 6. So 2 very strong sides going head-to-head. But I think Arsenal are going to remain unbeaten, and I'm going to go with Arsenal's women's team to win that one, Kemp.
Yeah, 18 goals scored, 1 conceded, a goal difference of 17, 18 points, 6 wins from 6 games. Very, very difficult to back against a team like that. So it's going to have to be Arsenal women's team for me, Adam.
Skin?
I mean, Kemp pretty much took the words out of my mouth. They're both in great form, but Arsenal just that little bit above. Gut wants to say score draw, but I'll go Arsenal women taking a 3-1 victory.
Absolutely. So those are your pick six. They will be available on social media platforms as well. If you did miss any of those, you have until 12 o'clock on Saturday to get in touch via any of the social media platform means or on the contact us page on loadedsport.co.uk to get your predictions in. And then by the time that the final whistle goes on the final game, normally around about 1 a.m. on a Monday morning, the league table will be updated on the Loaded Sport website. One last thing to sign off with then is the wildcard predictions from the three of us heading into the weekend. I'm going to go with the Texans to beat the Commanders, despite the fact that the Commanders have just beaten the Eagles and ended their, made them now, amongst everybody else, mortal, as Kemp said earlier on in the week. I still think that the Texans are going to have that sort of bit about them in this game where they're going to go out there and this will be a chance for them to make a statement. They're going to beat the one in 8-1, so to speak, to make a bit of a wrestling reference there as well. So I'm going to go with the Texans to beat the Commanders as my wild card. Skin, I'll come across to you for yours.
First of all, at Ben Musgrove. Second of all, my wild card pick this weekend, and I apologise in advance, Kemp, but is the Detroit Lions to beat the New York Giants. Sorry, mate, but Lions back-to-back wins. They were putting a lot of points on the board. They were playing in very entertaining games. They couldn't get the job done. Fair play, Giants have won 4 out of the last 5, but just something in my gut. It might be indigestion, but something in my gut's telling me Lions to beat Giants is the wild card pick for this weekend across the sports.
I think the main thing you need to remember and realise there is if it is a feeling in your gut and it is indigestion, have you got your Rennies? That is the question.
I haven't, mate, but if I need them, I know who's my man and I'll come and see you, mate.
There you go. You're very welcome. Wild card of the week for me, I'm going to go for the Cleveland Browns beating the Buffalo Bills. I think the Bills are in a...
That is a wild card. Let's have the reasoning for that.
I think the Bills are in a really tough spot. I think the form they've been on, the game they lost, I don't know. I've got a feeling it's all going to fall apart. I don't feel like they've got Allen's got the experience at quarterback and being a locker room leader and really pulling things together when things get tough. You know, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And you look at these players, nice. You look at these quarterbacks, these experienced players that I'm all right for now, that really drag the teams through difficult times. And again, I'm going to mention Aaron Rodgers. Again, I'm going to mention Tom Brady. And that takes years and years and years of being in those locker rooms and understanding what it needs. But I think the Bills, not only on the field, but in interviews and their body language, they just don't look right. So Cleveland Browns for me, I think, are going to take it. I think it's going to be close, but I think the Browns are going to win.
Well, Kemp, I'm actually going to give you a little bit of information that might help you become more confident about that pick. So I saw earlier weather reports have over 30 inches of snow falling in and around the Buffalo area over the weekend. So we could be looking at our first big snow game of this NFL season. What that means is a lot of carries, a lot of runs, not a lot of big passing plays, which we know Bills like to do with Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs over the top. It could mean a 30-plus carry game for someone like Nick Chubb. We know what he's capable of. So if I'm being honest, based on that, I'm inclined to sort of give you the benefit of the doubt and say maybe the Browns to beat Bills this weekend isn't the most outrageous of picks.
Thank you very much for joining me and going through and previewing this weekend's sporting action in both the NFL and the Football League and the National League as well. Make sure you are following us on all social media platforms as the World Cup preview show gets underway tomorrow. That'll be available for you to see on Friday evening, and hopefully we can then start celebrating England with a couple of wins. And of course, the celebration is